Louie T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up and take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Continued coverage of Commanders Camp here on the Louie T Network. Day 6 of training camp, which featured the first day of padded practices. For me, this is when training camp really begins. And all that other stuff feels like OTAs and minicamp. This feels like the real thing. Pads are on. Now we start to really separate the players that can get the job done at this level and the guys who are able to do it when things aren't as serious, bullets aren't live, things of that nature. The threat of violence always changes things, if you ask me. Okay, so this is when shit gets real in my estimation. So the first thing I always want to start off these camp coverage videos with is a quick recap of the injury report, similar to when we talk about game week and looking at, you know, what's coming down the pipeline. I always like to give you an update on what's going on from an injury standpoint. So again, what we're having, happen in camp right now from an injury standpoint is minor, compared to some of the teams around the league. The Cowboys just lost a receiver for the first 2 months, or at least the next 2 months. It could be longer. In James Washington, a guy that they signed in free agency that they were hoping was going to come in and really help them, he could be out for the first month, maybe month and a half of the season. You look at the Denver Broncos, they are going to be impacted. It seems like they may have just lost wide receiver Tim Patrick, who you guys know I really took a strong affinity to and wanted us to sign a free agency. He was never available. Broncos locked him up. He might have torn his ACL today in practice. So again, it could be a lot worse. We're dealing with minor bumps and bruises, the things that happen when you play football. So nothing big here to see, but it is noteworthy and worth mentioning. John Bates, tight end, dealing with a calf injury. He's been out of practice the last 2 days, and continuing to work through that, as Rivera, continues to say. We'll see when he's able to get back on the practice field. But again, no harm, no foul there. There's not really much you can do when a guy has an injury. You just have to wait until he's able to get healthy enough to get back on the practice field. Same for James Smith-Williams, JSW is a guy that we're hoping is able to continue to build on what he did a season ago. He is the first guy in line to step in for Chase Young. We know Young won't be ready for the start of the season. The hope is that Young will be back sometime within the first month of the season, but there's no guarantee about that. And so James Smith-Williams is a guy that we will be looking to lean on very heavily, along with F.A. Bada, opposite of Montez Sweat. Well, James Smith-Williams is dealing with a hip injury. I always get nervous when people start mentioning hips. Hopefully it's nothing more than like a hip pointer, which is essentially a bruise on the hip, and that he'll be fine in a couple of days. But right now, he's out nursing that. This was the first practice that he missed, so we'll see how long this lingers and when he'll be able to get back into practice. Trey Turner, this is the guy we've been talking about since last week, who was dealing with a quad injury, out of practice again, off on the side field. So just continue to monitor that situation because, again, the offensive line depth, I feel, is fine, but you don't want too many injuries on the offensive line because that's when the depth starts being eaten away at. And ultimately, you end up in a situation that we were in last year, and I felt like we made the best of that situation. But games like the first Cowboys game prove that you need all of your offensive linemen. You can't have a ton of injuries. You can't have a bunch of guys out due to COVID and things of that nature and expect not to be devoured by teams that can get after the quarterback. So it's great to have depth, but you want your frontline starters in the lineup. So it'll be nice to get Trey Turner back from that quad injury at some point. And then finally, Curtis Samuel. That's going to be one of those daily updates that we'll continue to have. Back, hamstring, both of those injuries have been what has kept him out of practice the last few days. He continues to be out of practice, all from the side field. Remember, Ron Rivera said this is all a part of the plan. Curtis Samuel himself said this is all a part of the plan. We will see, okay? Again, a lot of you are uneasy, very anxious. Some of you are downright frustrated with Curtis Samuel. Again, I'm going to take a wait-and-see approach. None of this stuff is going to resonate with me until we get to, again, late August, early September. If we're having the same conversation, okay, it is August the 2nd. Training camp is not even a week old yet. So I am not tripping, okay? I can't tell you how to feel, but I'm not tripping. But if we're having this same conversation come August 27th, okay? If we're having this same conversation a month from now, September the 2nd, now there's an issue. Now I'm concerned. Now I'm worried. Now I'm sounding the alarm. But on August the 2nd, 5 days into training camp, 6 days into training camp, not really worried. So we'll see what happens with Curtis Samuel, but he continues to work off to the side. They're trying to ramp him up, get his back, lower back, and hamstring where they need to be. Because as we all know, with guys like him who are, I like to call them high maintenance vehicles, hamstrings are a huge deal. Huge. And we don't want this to be something that lingers throughout the season. So we'll see if they're able to work this little plan that they have and get him back ready to rock and roll, before week 1. So something else that I've been talking about, and the coverage is going to get a little bit more in depth now that the pads are on. Like I've said, this is when, to me, shit gets serious now that the pads are on, right? So I'm going to be a little bit more in depth with, these practice recaps. So punt returner is a position that I'm narrowing in my focus on because, it's something that a lot of people kind of push to the back, the back burner and the back of the line in terms of order of importance. And I get it, but special teams is a huge part of winning football games. And we should know as fans, because there have been years where our special teams has been decrepit and it's cost us ball games, whether it's in the kicking game, whether it's the return game, the year Jamison Crowder couldn't hold on to the football. You remember the game against the Carolina Panthers that was a bitter pill to swallow, that we didn't get that win back in 2020 when we had a muffed punt by Steven Sims, who had a rough year that year. So we know that the special teams side of things and that aspect of the game can impact the outcome of football games. And so we don't even need to get started on the kicking aspect. So I think punt returner, kick returner is something that does need to have more light shed on it. Last year, it was actually a strength for us. DeAndre Carter was exceptional. Every time he touched the football, it seemed like it was something positive, whether it be on offense or special teams, something positive that was happening. He did have the drop, and a lot of you against Dallas that first game will not let that go. But there was more good that he did last year than negative. And I want a similar type of production out of that position this season, and I don't know if we're going to get that. So here are the guys right now that are consistently fielding punts at practice. And again, we can talk about practice all we want, but the games are ultimately what's going to decide who makes this football team and who's going to have the ability. Ron has already made it abundantly clear. The guy that fields punts also needs to be able to field kickoffs. They're not looking to have two different guys doing that. DeAndre Carter knocked out both of those responsibilities last year. He's looking for a similar type of player to do it again this upcoming season. So that guy also needs to be able to play receiver too, okay? He can't just be a special teams guy. He also needs to be able to contribute as a wide receiver. Ron has made that abundantly clear, as well as we saw DeAndre Carter's services were definitely needed as a receiver last year, so that guy has to be able to step into that role. Right now, I think the leading receiver in the clubhouse, and right now, all of the guys that are fielding punts are all receivers. There are no cornerbacks back there fielding punts. The guy that I think is the leader in the clubhouse right now is Dax Milne. That's the guy right now that can play all positions. Right now, they're having Dax Milne play every single wide receiver position. The X, the Z, the slot. They've got him moving all around, learning all the positions. So in a pinch, a guy goes down or two, he can step in no matter where in the formation. So that's a big credit to him to be able to learn all of those positions, but it's also a huge boost to him trying to make this roster because of the flexibility. We know Ron loves his positional flex, right? So his ability to do all of those things, field punts and kickoffs, will definitely be huge. Now, are you going to get, big returns out of Dax Milne? I don't think so. If you're looking for that, I think you may have to go in a different direction. If you're looking for a safe return man with a higher upside as a receiver, Dax Milne is your guy. If you're looking for higher upside as a return man, but maybe a lower return on investment from a receiver standpoint, then I think you may go the Jaquiz, Izzard, or Alex Erickson route. Now, there's another guy. So right now, the 4 guys that are getting a lot of work, and Jahan Dotson is getting work too, but trust me, Ron is not putting him back there. Ron is telling us every time he gets an opportunity, when he's asked about Jahan Dotson, even though Dotson is back there, I think they're just doing that in a pinch if they have to. Okay, Jahan Dotson will be available. You get into a big spot in a game and you need a boost. Let's say that Dax Milne ultimately ends up being your return man, but he's averaging 3 yards per punt return. And so you get into a big spot at 17-17 with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter of a game early in the season against Detroit. And you feel like you need a boost. And throughout the first 7 quarters of the season, Dax Milne has given you absolutely nothing as a punt returner. But you need a boost right now, okay? You can throw Jahan Dotson back there, okay? And he can maybe give you a huge return. Santana Moss did it for us once upon a time. Obviously, Darrell Green was a specialist that did it for us way back in the day. Deshaun Jackson was a guy that had a similar role in Philadelphia early in his career. So I think that does exist. That's not something they're looking to do very often. But they do want him to take some reps so that he keeps that ability, similar to riding a bike. You just want to keep that ability fresh. We know you know how to do it. We just want to make sure that the muscle memory is still there, that you can still perform that act. He's not returning punts for us on a regular basis. So I think the 4 guys that we should be focusing in on right now: Dax Milne, okay, Alex Erickson, Jaquiz Izzard, and Kyrik Mcgowan. This is a guy that's a rookie out of Georgia Tech that's undrafted here in Washington's camp. Another receiver that they have thrown back there in the mix. He also had probably the best catch of today's camp, a 40-yard catch or so from Taylor Heineke, where he went up and grabbed it and climbed the ladder. So he's showing some ability as a receiver, also giving them a little bit of value as a return man. So we'll see if he's able to make a name for himself throughout camp and into the preseason, because that's going to be important, is making a name for yourself in the preseason as well. Camp is huge, okay, because that's what they see every single day, but they also want to see it when the lights are its brightest during these preseason games. So those are the 4 guys right now that I think are vying for that last receiver spot. I think the first 5 are spoken for, and we know the names, okay? We know the Terry McLaurin, the Cam Sims, the Curtis Samuel, the De'Ami Brown, and the Jahan Dotsons of the world. Those 5 are locks to make the roster, barring any kind of catastrophe. I think there is a 6th roster spot at receiver that is available for a guy that's going to return kicks and punts and also can play the receiver position. My money is on Dax Milne right now, but I would not count out any of the other 3 guys. But Milne, to me, has the inside track, was here last year, knows the offense, and if he can just show them that, if nothing else, I'm competent enough just to field the punts, okay? Not fumble the kickoffs, get you back to the 25-yard line if need be, because most kickoff returns are touchbacks anyway. It's more of the punt returning aspect. If he can do that successfully, I think he's going to be your 6th and final receiver. So one-on-one drills, the return of one-on-one drills. With pads on comes one-on-one drills. The ones I really want to focus on primarily are the offensive line versus the defensive line. I'll talk a little bit about receivers here in a second, and corners and things of that nature. But the big focus for me, one-on-one drills with the offensive and defensive line. So we'll start with Montez Sweat, who has been an animal in camp. I'm telling you right now, he's the guy that I'm looking at, and I'm saying if he stays healthy, he's gonna go off this year. He's the guy that's talking the most shit in camp. He's confident. This is the same thing he did last year, mind you. Okay, he was talking a lot of shit in camp last year, and he was very confident last year. But I think that the swag is a little different this year. I think he knows, all right, I'm that dude. I just got to stay healthy, and I got to go out and prove it. So I'm looking forward to big things from Montez Sweat. He had a couple of nice rushes. Now, I will say, remember last year in camp when he went one-on-one with then rookie Sam Cosmi, he dominated Cosmi, okay? And we talked about it on this very program. This time around, Cosmi was a lot more poised. He was able to hold his own against Montez Sweat. You know, Sweat won 1 of 3 rushes, whereas Cosmi won 2 out of the 3 this year. So it's always good to know Sam is holding his own against Montez Sweat. Iron sharpens iron. And Montez, another little nugget on Montez. So they're running that 5-man defensive front that we talked about, that, you know, a lot of times they usually don't pull that out unless they feel like, hey, we might have some trouble today stopping the run. Let's go ahead, nip it in the bud, put the extra defensive lineman down up front, and we'll go about it that way. Well, they've been doing that in practice, and with one exception, Montez Sweat is standing up, and he actually dropped into coverage. Almost as if they were playing a 3-4 defensive front and he was an outside linebacker. And you know how sometimes that outside linebacker drops into coverage. And we know Sweat is a tremendous athlete. And he was out in space and he looked fluid and he was making some plays. So just another wrinkle that they added in there, something to keep note of. Just file that away in the back of your brain. Don't worry about that too much. Speaking of offensive linemen, it was a rough go of it in one-on-one drills for one of the newer Commander offensive linemen in Andrew Norwell, who was absolutely devoured and shredded by Jonathan Allen. On 3 reps, Allen handled him with ease, beat him with quickness once, beat him with power twice. It was a really eye-opening type of situation. We need him to be better. Now, it's Jonathan Allen. That's our best defensive lineman. So if you're going to get your ass kicked by someone, it probably should be Jonathan Allen. And you don't feel as bad if it's him. But I need you to hold your own. Similar to Sam Cosmi holding his own against Montez Sweat. Yeah, Sweat's going to win 1 or 2 of those. I expect Jonathan Allen to win 1 or 2. I don't expect him to have a clean sweep, win all 3, and win them with no problems at all. Now, one of the problems with Andrew Norwell was pass protection. He's good in the run game, not as great as a pass protector. We're going to need him to tighten his shit up, okay? Look, it's the first day of pads. It's the first day of one-on-one drills. I'm not overreacting, nor should you. But it's just something, again, file that away. Mental note, move on, okay? Glad to hear Jonathan Allen's looking to be in midseason form. How about David Bada? This is a guy that's in the International Pathway Program, IPP. We talk about this all the time. He's a guy that they're hoping. Right now, we don't have a 4th defensive tackle, okay? We have 3 defensive tackles that we know are making the football team. If you want to talk about a position where there is an opening for a player, there aren't many on this roster. We feel like most of the roster spots are spoken for, but on the back end of the roster, they're probably about 5, maybe 7 at most roster spots available. We talked about corner, we talked about safety, we talked about kick returner as a receiver, but linebacker is something else we've always, talked about. Tight end. We haven't talked much about defensive tackle. Somebody has to be the 4th defensive tackle on this football team. Okay, we've got the Alabama wall, and now that wall has been extended to 3 players. It was just 2. It's now Allen, Payne, and Mathis, but there's no one behind those guys. So David Botta now enters into the mix as a legitimate option. This is a guy that's been here now for 2 years in that IPP, International Pathway Program, and he's coming along nicely. He was really good in one-on-one drills today, winning several times. So that's a guy to keep an eye on when we see these preseason games. These are the types of names. Look, you shouldn't be getting excited to see Jahan Dotson. You're not going to see a ton of Jahan Dotson, okay? These are the names you should be thinking about. David Botta, what is he doing when he gets in with the 2nd unit, okay? These are the guys that we should be looking at, because these are the guys that are going to have a legitimate opportunity to make the football team. He looked good in one-on-one drills. We want to see him carry that over into team drills and team periods and then onto the field in the preseason. Now let's get to the corners and receivers real quick. De'Ami Brown was fantastic in one-on-ones today. Beat Benjamin St. Juice in a one-on-one drill. He also beat William Jackson III in a one-on-one drill, did De'Ami Brown. Also beat cornerback Christian, the rookie, Christian, what's his face? It'll come to me. So beat him in one-on-one drills as well. They call him SIP, okay? So De'Ami had a strong day as a one-on-one, wide receiver in those drills. Actually had a little bit of success in some team drills. Did have a drop in team drills, but the overarching theme there is De'Ami Brown is improving. He looks more confident. He looks stronger, more physical. These are things that we were looking for from him in year 2. Again, we need this to carry over to game reps. Okay, it's cool to hear about it in practice. Need it to carry over to game reps, but it's good to see it carrying over to when the pads are being applied. So it was a good day for him. Benjamin St. Juice was really good today in one-on-one drills. Very handsy. I've talked about this with him. This was my pet peeve of his coming out of Minnesota, was his hands were very active, and I could see them getting him in trouble at the next level. Now, last year, he wasn't a very handsy guy, surprisingly enough. Some of that, though, is because of the coverages that are being played. He's playing off a little bit more, so not really putting his hands on the receiver. When you come up in practice, it's one-on-one. You're not giving a bunch of airspace, so you're putting your hands on that receiver immediately. Excuse me. And so you could see, some of these the hand infractions, the holding of the jersey up top. If you want to be a veteran, you want to use your hands, do it down low where the official can't see it, where it's not as clear and obvious. He needs to learn some of those subtleties. But him against Jahan Dotson in the slot, he had a deflection. There was one where clearly he was holding Jahan Dotson. But just the fact that he's continuing to get work against who we think is one of our better receivers shows us that he does have the potential to, play in the slot maybe this year. We may be able to sneak him on the field while still keeping Kendall Fuller and William Jackson III all on the field at the same time. So they're trying to find ways to get some of their best players on the field. Benjamin St. Juice, to me, qualifies as one of those guys. We'll see if he's up to the task or not. I think it's a tough ask of a guy his size to play receivers. Now, I can tell you this, receivers in the slot, they're getting bigger and bigger every year, okay? And these things go in cycles. Once upon a time, guys like Jake Reed and Joe Juravicius were playing in the slot. These are huge 6'4", 6'5" receivers. And then it shrunk back down to the Wes Welkers and the Danny Amendolas of the world. And those guys became in vogue. And I think we're getting back to the bigger slot receiver again. We're seeing guys like Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams kick ass inside. And so I think, all these things go in circles, right? And so we're in the big receiver inside, phase. And so I think Benjamin St. Juice might actually be able to hold his own against those guys. I don't know if he'll be able to consistently hold his own against guys the size of a Jahan Dotson with the quickness and the speed that a guy like Dotson possesses. But he's getting to work. I like that. And then finally, Carson Wentz. Let's talk about Carson Wentz. So a lot of you, I read some of your comments yesterday, and you were upset at the fact that I didn't mention the interceptions. There were 5 interceptions by the defensive backs in practice yesterday, 3 or 4 of them off the right arm of Carson Wentz. Look, at the end of the day, that doesn't faze me. Someone had sent me a tweet about, Jalen Hurts struggling in practice and throwing interceptions. And I said, oh, good thing it's practice. Like, to me, it doesn't matter. Like, I look at practice as this is the opportunity for you to get these, types of plays out of your system. But again, understand, and this is why it's not a big deal. Less of what I just said about, this is the time to get it out your system because you don't want your quarterback turning it over at any point, right? But it's less of that, more of this. Right now, now that pads are on, this is why I say, this is when shit gets real. Because without the pads, there's not a lot of run game stuff being worked on because you really can't see what is going on with the offensive line, with the defensive line, with the linebackers and the tracks that they're taking and whether they're filling the proper gaps. You can't see any of that stuff. when there are no pads on. You guys have to be careful. You're not going as hard. It's not that productive to do a bunch of running plays, right? So everything is more so about the passing game, trying to get that in sync, trying to get your quarterback and receivers on the same page. They were running a lot of empty sets. What does that tell the defense? Well, it's definitely not a run. They're not switching up snap counts and cadences, so they know how to jump the snap count. So everything right now is beneficial to the defense, which is why we talk about the defense being ahead of the offense early in camp. So I'm not getting too bent out of shape about mistakes, because this is all geared and slanted towards the defense being successful. If the defense knows that this is a passing play, then they can be more equipped to deal. They don't have to think, they can just react. Things change now when you get into padded practices and the threat of the run is now in play. And so the offense was much better today. Wentz himself in 7-on-7 drills, Wentz was damn near flawless. 1 incompletion in 7-on-7, and that was a drop by running back Brian Robinson. So he was outstanding in 7-on-7. Now, when they switched to 11-on-11, so full team drills, Wentz struggled a little bit more. However, he had some completions. He did some good things, but he was not as sharp as he was in the 7-on-7 drills. So, again, it's a process, and I expect them to continue to work out the kinks. It's not going to be perfect, far from it, but it's a work in progress. This is his first year in this system. This is his first time working with these receivers. It's going to take time, and now that the pads have been introduced, I think it's going to benefit the offense. Speaking of benefiting the offense, there was some good run period late in practice where J.D. McKissick, Antonio Gibson all had some big runs. Jarrett Patterson had a nice 15-yard run. So they're now getting into the portion of practices now with the pads being on where now the defense has to respond to the run, and now they have to start to process what's going on. That's going to open up some opportunities for the offense to be sharper and a little bit more productive. So I expect these practices to start to even out now. Yep, they're going to still be days where the defense dominates, but I expect to hear the offense got the better of the defense today. And I expect to hear that, more often than we've heard, to start camp. So it was good to hear Wentz was a little bit sharper today, because he definitely was not on his best behavior yesterday. And I expect him to improve as camp wears on, as we get into the preseason. I expect him to improve. Each and every single day, each and every single week, I expect him to get much better and more closer to the guy we need come the start of this season, on the same page with his skill guys, okay? Cole Turner is a guy that he's taken a liking to. Jahan Dotson, another guy, Terry, he's starting to work into a nice little rhythm with him. So we're seeing these things happen. The wheels are turning. Now we just need consistency, and that's where the reps come in, and I feel like we're trending in that direction. Ron Rivera spoke today. So did Cole Holcomb and Jahan Dotson. Nothing major from any of those guys. Ron did the biggest takeaway from Ron's conversation was surrounding the linebackers. And specifically, he was asked about Jamin Davis, and you should have seen, and I'm pretty sure most of you have, but if you haven't, you need to see the smile that lights up on Ron Rivera's face when he's asked about Jamin Davis and his improvement and where he is in his maturation process, the difference between this year and last year. And Ron couldn't wait to speak very glowingly of Jamin Davis's, progress. He talked about him understanding drops, making faster reads, getting into coverage, knowing the route combinations and being better equipped to get where he needs to be. Talking about him making faster run fits, just looking like a guy that is more sure of himself, playing at a much higher rate of speed in year 2 thus far than in year 1. And it's so easy to see because they put so much on his plate. They're doing the same thing with Percy Butler. Right now they got Butler playing the post, okay? They got, which is the single high safety. They got Percy Butler also playing the Buffalo nickel. And honestly, when you got a guy that fast with this kind of ability, like they had with Jamin Davis, why are you making these guys overthink things? Why are you cluttering their mind? A free and uncluttered mind is a dangerous player, especially with the kind of speed and attributes that those guys have. I feel like they just need to take Percy Butler. And you know, 2 things isn't too bad. You know, but eventually they're going to probably branch out, have him doing all these different things. Just keep it simple, man. Let these guys with all this athleticism fly around and do what they're capable of doing. And you're seeing that right now with Jamin Davis. Again, I need to see that transfer over to these actual preseason games and into the regular season. But I'm confident. I've told you guys this already, that he's going to have a really good second year because they're going to simplify things for him. You don't have to know all 3 linebacker positions. You don't have to worry about playing the middle linebacker position. You just worry about playing outside linebacker. Do that, and I think he's going to excel. So Cole Holcomb also said, I don't have to worry about Jamin anymore. He knows what he's doing. I'm confident and comfortable with where he's at mentally. I don't have to worry about him. Last year, when you get a rookie in there, as a veteran, it's your job to babysit him. He took Jamin Davis under his wing and made it his responsibility to make sure that that young fella was up to speed on what was going on. He's like, I don't have to do that this year. He's good, okay? I can allow him to spread his wings and fly away. So I feel like all the returns right now on Jamin Davis are positive. And so I'm looking forward to a nice, solid campaign from Jamin Davis in year number 2. So that's camp coverage, day number 6. First day with pads on. I'm excited about padded practices moving forward. Looking forward to seeing guys separate themselves. You're starting to hear about some of the things going on, and we'll continue to cover all of them as they happen here on the Louie T Network. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Until next time, you know what it is. I'm a Washington fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My spirit would never die, spirit would never fold. Until next time, post up. Take command. You guys, take care. Have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.